It's just crazy that whenever somebody in the women's space and in women's sports, and specifically in women's basketball, does something that's so impressive, there are still people that are going to be like, oh, she doesn't deserve this because Pistol Pete did it in 3 years without a three-point line. Big news in the world of college basketball. It is official. Caitlin Clark has broken the all-time leading scoring record in NCAA history. She officially passed up Pistol Pete. On senior day at Carver Hawkeye Arena, Clark entered the game against Big Ten regular season champion Ohio State, needing 18 points to pass Maravich, who scored 3,667 points in his 3 seasons at LSU from 1967 to 1970. And of course, she finished the game with 35 points, 9 assists, and 6 rebounds in their victory against Ohio State. I'm loving the fact that, first of all, it seems like most of the comments and reaction to Caitlin Clark breaking this record are all positive, and you have a lot of celebrities chiming in. LeBron tweeted out, Travis Scott showed up to that game in Iowa. Also, Jake from State Farm was there also. He seems to literally be everywhere. He was there. It seems like it's just such a monumental moment. Maya Moore was there also, who is somebody who Caitlin has looked up to for many, many years. So it seems like overall it's just such a positive impact. And like I've been talking about on the show, I feel like she is such a great example for what the future could look like for women's basketball, not only alone in college and in youth, but also for the WNBA, because my entire point about why or how I think the WNBA can improve and get more eyeballs and have more interest in it is if we're focusing on these individual players, and Caitlin Clark just continues to break records and just change the game in a way that we saw when Steph Curry came into the NBA. And I feel like she is doing that for the women's game. She doesn't need to dunk to change the game. She doesn't need to be able, to poster somebody to get eyeballs on her, which is what so many people were saying is what the women's game needed. She is shooting these long range shots. She has great handles. She's creating for herself. And she also is elevating her team, because Iowa is successful for the most part because of her. I couldn't help but notice, however, that there were some comments that were saying things like, here's one, for example, I like her, but this achievement is nowhere near as impressive as Pete's dominance. And when you add in the 3-point line, which he didn't have, she doesn't touch his numbers. Whenever there's an accomplishment from any women, and specifically in the basketball space, I don't know what it is about the fans of this sport, but there always seems to be something negative. Like, we can't just give the praise and move on. There has to be some sort of comparison. And for that reason alone, and there's quite a bit of comments like this on Twitter and on Instagram, just saying like, impressive, but it's nothing like Pistol Pete. I decided to dive into the archives and actually pull up the stats from both of these players and do a little side-by-side comparison. So back in the 60s and 70s, for men's basketball, there was still like a kind of like JV and varsity squad. So if you were a freshman in the NCAA, your stats didn't count because you weren't officially on the varsity team yet. It's kind of weird, but so he played 19 games in his freshman season, but none of those stats counted toward the final number. Points per game, he averaged 44.2 points per game. His field goal percentage was 43.8%. His free throw percentage, which actually kind of surprised me, was 77.5%, which is not very good. And he averaged 5.1 assists per game. So another thing to note, in college basketball back in the day, there was no 3-point line. And so every shot was just worth 2 points. So it had also been reported that LSU coach Dale Brown charted every shot Maravich scored and concluded that if his shots from 3-point range had been counted as 3 points, Maravich average would have totaled 57 points per game and 12 3-pointers per game. Now, I don't know if we can take all of this as factual, because it wasn't clearly documented, and I don't think we can find the shot chart of Pistol Pete from every single game, and 12 3-pointers per game just seems absolutely insane. But he was also putting up like 40 shots per game as well. Also, the last thing to note is that back in the day, they also didn't have a shot clock. Pistol Pete's, for example, very impressive. 44.2 points per game. Clearly, it seems like the discrepancy between his skill level and his teammates and the people he was competing against were, he was up here and everybody else was down here. So Caitlin Clark, total games played 129 as compared to Pete's 83. Points per game, she's averaging 28.3 points per game, which is also very, very, very impressive. Field goal percentage, 46.6%, which is a solid 3% more than Pistol Pete's field goal percentage. And mind you, I would guarantee that she is shooting from a lot longer range than Pistol Pete ever did. Her free throw percentage, very impressive, 85.6%, and she averages 8.1 assists per game. She's almost averaging, you guys, a double-double per game, which is 3 assists more than Pistol Pete is averaging. So taking all of this into consideration, yes, Pete racked up all these points in 3 seasons. However, the competition level that he was facing in that time compared to what Caitlin Clark is facing in this time. And also we also are not taking into consideration how different just the landscape of college basketball was and how LSU wasn't playing the powerhouse teams. They weren't playing everybody around the country as NCAA and college does now. So it's very hard between these two eras. I think we can give props and flowers to both of these two people, but to take anything away from what Caitlin has done, it's just crazy that whenever somebody in the women's space and in women's sports and specifically in women's basketball does something that's so impressive, there are still people that are going to be like, oh, she doesn't deserve this because Pistol Pete did it in 3 years without a 3-point line. So overall, my takeaway, even when I put these two stats next to each other, they are still in Caitlin's favor because she has proven to not only be the best scorer in college basketball history, but also someone who helps her team win, is a well-rounded player, and is nearly averaging a triple-double in her stats. When you look at how she's helped her team success, she got to this milestone not by chasing numbers, not by chasing, and I'm not saying that Pete did either, but not chasing the numbers and saying, I need to hit that scoring record. No, she hit this milestone by winning games with her team. And I think with that, it shows the complete well-rounded player that Caitlin Clark is. And I'm very excited to see her future. So as I was looking at this all-time leaderboard, this name kept coming up, Pearl Moore. So Pearl Moore is technically, if you go to all divisions in college basketball, the leading scorer in all of college basketball with 4,061 points. That she ended her career in 1979. So this is also a time when there was no 3-point line. However, Pearl Moore, the only information I could find about her was on the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame website. So she was a 4-time All-American, and she's the all-time career scoring leader for women's college basketball with 4,061 points. However, she went to a college named Francis Marion, which is a Division II school. Pearl Moore averaged 30.6 points per game over her 4 seasons, 127 games at Francis Marion College during the era that did not have the 3-point field goal. She was named the 1979 South Carolina Amateur Athlete of the Year, and she was a first-round draft choice in the WBL and participated in the 1981 WBL All-Star Game. She was inducted into the Francis Marion Hall of Fame, the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame, and was part of the inaugural class for the Florence Area Athletic Hall of Fame in 2006. She also played professionally for 1 season in Venezuela. I had never heard of Pearl Moore, and I just thought this was interesting because I was now seeing her name pop up here and there. But also super impressive, 30.6 points per game in a Division II school, but still going to give Caitlin Clark the crown. She has 3,685 career points and counting, and it will be very interesting to see how she ends up.